that gets me to my next thing, which is DORA metrics. So you are out there, have adopted DORA metrics. Maybe you're thinking about adopting DORA metrics. Maybe you've been doing it for a year or two and you're just wondering what's next. It can be a bit of an investment to start tracking those DORA metrics and using them, but you want to make sure you're getting that return on the investment. So I'm going to bring on our guest to talk more about it and give you some ideas on how you can maximize your investment in DORA metrics. And as I said, really take that to the next level. So I would like to introduce Leigh Ann. I'm going to get it right since I screwed up the pronunciation of my last guest. I'm a terrible host. Leigh Ann Whitmarsh to the show. She is the head of customer success here at Sleuth, as well as support, and someone that actually begged to come join my company as soon as she was ever possibly available from a previous company because I enjoyed working with her so much. So I'm super excited not only to have her on this show, but just to have her here in general. Thank you, Leigh Ann, for coming on.
Thank you. And thank you for correcting the name. That was well done.
Yes, I am trying to improve. That's what it's like. That's what life is all about. It's all about improving things. Igor says Leigh Ann is the boss. Oh, I got to totally put that one up on the screen because Leigh Ann is the boss. Actually, Igor also worked with me at a previous job, also with Leigh Ann. So he was just one of those people on a short list. You start a new company, you're like, oh, I would love to work with these people again. Leigh Ann is definitely one of mine. Adam, also the one and only Leigh Ann. And I can't forget Tracy, who also, from his hospital bed, I don't think he's actually his hospital bed, but it just sounds so much more dramatic if he's on his hospital bed and his last breath of life is to say, hey, Leigh Ann. Little drama. Who doesn't love a little drama? Anyways, what were we talking about? Oh, yes, about DORA metrics. So, Leigh Ann, sorry, go ahead.
I think we were talking about DORA metrics. I'm pretty sure that was the goal, but
let's do that.
I'll take all the happy stuff. That's pretty nice too.
Yes. Because as I said, we've been talking to thousands of people out there and thousands of different teams. And as ourselves, we've been going through this journey of adopting DORA metrics. So the whole point of DORA metrics, if you're brand new to DORA metrics, I will just give you the quick summary. And that is, it is 4 metrics that have been shown by science, by research, to actually correlate to high-performing teams. And these metrics give you an idea basically of how quickly you are able to produce, but also the quality of what you're producing, which is pretty cool. So these are things that we've started tracking in the last year, but as we've sold a product that, and actually, honestly, the product, as I mentioned last time, didn't start out as a DORA metrics tracker. We just had people coming to us again and again and again saying, hey, what you do is great, but can you give me DORA metrics? And so then we pivoted over into that, and we're just finding more and more people, as well as existing customers that are using these metrics, but then also wanting to go to that next level. So let's talk about these different levels. So I think, Leigh Ann, when you and I worked on it, we came up with kind of 4 different levels that we felt kind of matched to these things. When you talk to people who are kind of brand new to DORA metrics, what do you find is that kind of that first level, the entry point into the world of tracking your efficiency? What's the pain that's driving them?
What I hear the most is change lead time. We want to understand how much time it's taking from when the developer starts writing code for a feature or change to when that change is actually released to the end users. I hear a whole lot of, I think, or I'm pretty sure it's this, or maybe it's that, but I don't know about you. Most of us don't really sleep that well at night. I've just got feelings. Like, as much as we want to, those little things hanging in the back of your head aren't great. We need to make room for other things. So we want to understand exactly what's happening. We want to be able to see, am I gut feeling right? How much of your CLT is actual coding time versus review time? I can't tell you how many times I've seen managers surprised to know that their review time was 3 times longer than their coding time. And it was truly the reason that for that gut feeling that they had that something wasn't quite right. But by starting to measure it and identifying that, they're able to start to understand the details, understand specific projects or teams that are eating up time in one place or another. Sometimes it's explained by like patterns or even team changes, which I don't know about you, but we've seen that a lot if you've been growing. Um, especially when you're growing fast and you're moving fast. Um, those little changes in your teams or in your processes can be reflected. Um, so problem is if you can't actually see it, how do you know? How do you know which thing is being impacted? I think Don, you've definitely seen that in a lot of different places. And as we've been measuring and as we've been tracking and as we've been changing and growing, there's all sorts of things that have popped up. You're like, oh gosh, I wouldn't have known that. I think you shared a story with me the other day about um, our lead time. We noticed that it increased significantly recently. This is something we talked about a little bit on the last episode. Um, and we dug in to understand why that was happening and found out it was actually because our CEO was responsible for some reviews, but he was kind of busy doing other CEO stuff. So while we would totally expect that to happen, it shows us that maybe we need to shift those responsibilities to another member of the team that can focus more on the daily tasks and let them get back to doing CEO things. That's just one example, though. I know that there's tons of those out there. Don, you may have a couple others you want to share. But if you're in the chat, if you're here live, I'd love to hear more about, what kind of gut feelings do you have about your change lead time that you think may not quite be right, and are curious to like really start tracking it and dig in and understand if you've got it right, or if maybe there's something hiding back there that you didn't know about.
Right. Change lead time is a good one. And just for those who maybe aren't as familiar with DORA metrics, change lead time is a measurement of how long it takes you to get a change out to production. So it's kind of time from first code commit all the way out to production. And yeah, when we talk to people who are interested in DORA metrics, one of the common things that they say is, yeah, I really want to know how long it's taking, because efficiency is all about improving and getting more things out with what you have. And so knowing how long it takes you to get something out is a really key part of that process. And if I take a step back kind of from what you're saying, what we hear is often people have a specific question or pain point, and that's what starts them on the DORA metrics journey. It's not, I want to adopt some cutting edge thing and I don't really know what I'm wanting for it. No, the people that are the most successful have a specific thing in mind. For example, when I was at one company, our number one thing was we were deploying code every 3 months, and we wanted to deploy it once every day or so. And so that deployment frequency was the number one thing. And I just want to highlight another thing that you said, which is really important, which is you often start on those journeys and you forget to measure the thing that you're trying to improve. And so then later on, when it's been 2-3 weeks and the product person is saying, hey, why haven't you shipped this? Why haven't you improved this? And you're like, but we made a lot of progress on this one thing we're working on. Then they say, well, I don't see. Yeah, how do I know? Like your change lead time, yeah, you can get things out quicker. But like, what's your measurement of that? Is it 30% better? Is it 50% better? And so by measuring that, that can really help that specific initiative that you have in mind. So it's not just a theoretical. It's not just, I feel like it's going well, but it's actually something going well.
Absolutely. And you brought up a couple of interesting things that we're going to talk about a little bit more later about sharing information with other departments and other people in your company too.
Yeah.
But yeah, identifying that one thing it's so helpful, and it tends to open up some doors. So once you start to see what that one metric is and start to understand it, I think then it's time to start looking at building that out and going, well, wait a minute, what else is there? Like, if I just learned this, this, and this, and all of a sudden that one thing that was keeping me up at night is solved and I can see it now, what do I do next? Like, how do we continue to make it better?
Right. Well, that kind of, I guess,
that's where things get real interesting.
Yeah, I guess that kind of really leads into that second part. So when we see people coming here, so again, if you're out there and you're just thinking about getting started on DORA metrics, I'm going to guess that you have a specific thing you're wanting to improve. But you're saying kind of once you get to that stage, once you've said, okay, I want to measure deployment frequency, change lead time, and improve that, whatever, that's not the end of the journey. That's really just the beginning. Like, it's good to do. And in fact, I would almost say if you stop there, you could be in a little bit of trouble. I'll just say that. And the reason why I say that is because one thing I like about the DORA metrics is that it doesn't just look at how fast you go, but anyone who's been in any kind of leadership position knows if you go really fast in one direction, but it's the wrong direction, then what the hell point was that? Or if you go really fast in a direction, but you're just breaking things all left, right, and center the whole time, you're not actually making everything better. You're just actually making everything way worse. You're just failing quicker, a lot more. It's like, okay. So it's probably the next step, I think, as we were talking about, is going from just one metric that you're interested, but starting to look at the other metrics. And I think this is where tracking DORA metrics becomes really powerful, because you're not just getting a myopic view of this one thing you want to improve, but you're starting to understand its impact across other aspects of things. So I wanted to hear an example that you have in talking to customers of how you've talked to them and they've had success going from one to the other. But before I do, I just want to say, give our kind of collective apology to everybody. They have decided to jackhammer outside Leigh Ann's door. And every now and then it stops and we're like, oh, we don't have to deal with that. And then it comes right back in. So we're doing the best we can. This is what's fun. This is all live. This is no pre-rehearsal. We're going to get it right with a perfect sound studio. This is all live, because that's, anyways, that's what it is. So thank you for your patience. Anyway, so we're talking about tracking not just one, but multiple metrics. Leigh Ann, talk to me a little bit about people that stories that you've heard as they go from one to many.
You bet. Okay, so one that actually happened fairly recently, a engineering director that I've been working really closely with, as they've been trying to adopt DORA metrics and learn how to improve and manage their teams and their performance better. We had a conversation about Sentry, and they were using Sentry. Kind of, they had it, but they'd stopped looking at it because it was just noise. There was so much coming in that it wasn't useful anymore. So here they are, they're using this tool, they're paying for it, but they're not using it. They're not looking at it. And so we talked about it and talked about what they wanted to do with it and what they expected they should be getting out of it. I was like, why don't we just connect it to the tracker and let's see what happens. So we did, connected it, started looking at it, started seeing some patterns, started catching some errors that were coming through that didn't need to be there. I mean, obviously there are some that are absolutely expected and acceptable. And you go, okay, yep, I know what those are. I understand them. Those are going to happen. But there were some others that went, wait, these are easy fixes. If we can start fixing these things and cutting down on some of the noise, then maybe this will actually become more valuable. So he took it back to his team and they said, well, why don't we just disconnect it then? Like if there's all this stuff in there, like we don't need to see it. Like, well, wait a minute. Why don't we fix it, make some positive changes that are small, that are easy, that low-hanging fruit, if you will, and see what a difference that can make, and see if then we can actually start really utilizing Sentry and understanding the errors that are coming through, so that when there is something that's important, we'll actually see it instead of just glossing over it. So that's what they did. And now they're actually getting more value out of Sentry, as well as getting value out of their tracker. And they're able to actually see what's happening. Their devs are happier because they don't feel like they're being bombarded by this mess of things coming in. It's been really cool to watch that happen. And it seemed like such a tiny little thing, but it made a huge difference in their entire engineering department by just going, let's just connect it and see what we can find. That was pretty neat.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think that's a great story of just how sometimes we just get so like we just want to buy tools to solve all the problems, and we just keep buying tools, but we don't really tie it all together. We don't really see the net effect of all these things. Like we look at it in isolation and say, oh, well, Sentry's giving us errors. Oh, that's really useful. And oh, this deployment thing is doing this. But we don't put it together and say, how are all these things working together toward our goal of getting things out quicker and failing less frequently, things like that. And so getting these kind of DORA metrics views you've found is a great way to really kind of tie these disparate things together so that you can see the forest for the trees, if you will, and to make specific improvements.
Yeah, it's really bringing that whole picture together and all in one place. So instead of having to go and look at 7 different places, you start at one and you've got an overview of everything that's happening, and you can start drilling down and see something that's not right or something that's fantastic. There's that too. We talk about errors and issues and things that come up all the time. Then we forget to talk about, like, well, wait a minute. What if something's going even better than you expected it to go? Like, why is that happening? And how can we make that happen across the entire org? So it can go both ways, but getting more value out of tech stack that you already have in place by just implementing tracking for DORA is kind of amazing. Like when that happened, I went, oh, well, that's cool. Like, let's see what else we can do now. So then we've started looking at other tools and other things that can be connected that we should be looking at to see if we can clean things up even more across the whole house.
That's an interesting point. I guess that's something we never talk about. We always talk about like we need to improve. There are problems we need to fix. But what we don't do sometimes is say what is going well and what should we be celebrating, not just focusing on the negative and what's not good. What should we be celebrating that's going right? And that kind of reminds me of one thing that I found some people use, and in fact, I would say we use it ourselves, is DORA metrics as a way to communicate within a company, kind of how things are going. And yeah, sometimes it's we're trying to improve our deployment frequency or whatever, but actually, honestly, and I would say even say for my team, a lot of it has been celebrating how we've been able to get things out, how we've been able to keep shipping things. We have people on vacation, whatever, and we're still getting things out. And so by tracking that, that gives us something to kind of share and celebrate internally, which is a really important thing to do, especially as more and more teams are remote and it's really hard to get a sense of how things are and celebrate some of those wins to create that stronger culture. That can be a useful tool.
Absolutely. And I think, we might be getting a little ahead of ourselves on improvements. There's one more part of this in this kind of level 2 that I want to make sure that we touch on before we get too far forward is talking about setting goals and understanding measurements. It's really easy to go in and say, well, this is what I think our change lead time should be. This is what our frequency should be because I read it somewhere and that seems like the right thing. But is it really the right thing for your team, and how feasible is it? I think it's really important to, once you start tracking and start seeing what's happening for real, you can look at that and go, okay, here's what I think our goals should be. But you can also present that with, here's how I think we can get there based on the facts that I have in front of me. And instead of just throwing something out there and hoping it sticks to the wall like a spaghetti needle, um, you can actually say, here's where we are, here's where I'd like us to be, and here are the steps we need to take to get there because here's the data and the proof that I have by tracking these metrics. I think that can be a really powerful statement, and generally providing facts and kind of black and white information resonates a little bit better with most of us in this field. um, and maybe you thought that your lead time should be, I don't know, no more than 6 hours, but when you start tracking it, you realize it's more like 3 or 4 days. You go, okay, why? Like, I did not think it was that long, or I don't understand where that's coming from. So let's dig in and find out why, and then present a plan not only of a goal, but of how to actually get there. Um, Investigating the bottlenecks and showing that tangible evidence for improvements just seems to make such a big difference. But those metrics that maybe were like, I just want to make sure we're getting things out, like 3, 4 days would be amazing. And then you get in there and go, wait a minute, our average time is like 10, 12 hours. Like, what's going on here? So on the flip side, you go back to that celebration that Don was talking about and being able to look at exactly what happened to make that go so well, and then being able to model that for other teams, and also being able to set goals around it where, like, your metrics aren't your goals, they're measurements, but they will help you to set realistic goals and help you to build a case on how to meet those goals.
And I just want to highlight that point because that is such a good point that I think people often forget is when they hear, oh, we're going to start measuring engineering. I mean, I was actually at a CTO lunch just yesterday, and of course, you go around the table, what do you guys do? Or what do you all do? And they ask, what does your company do? And I said, oh, we help you measure and improve engineering efficiency. And immediately the more technical one in the group just kind of recoiled a little bit like, oh, you're one of those people. And I was like, well, wait a minute. We don't measure people. We don't go around and say that this person's bad or this person's good. And the other thing that I think people often miss, and I'm not saying that metrics can't be used for good or evil. In fact, I'll be completely honest, they can totally be used for evil. But I think what people miss is that they take these numbers, these measurements, and they make them the goal. And the reason why that's dangerous is because when you tell me my job, even as a manager, my job is to improve this number, I'm going to find a way to prove that number. If everything else burns, I kind of don't care, because my job is to hit this number and I want to get that performance raise. I don't want to be looked down on or whatever. And so it just becomes focused on that. And that, at the moment, as I think the quote goes, the moment that a measure becomes a goal, it ceases to become a good measure. And that's why, because now it's no longer measuring something that's already happened. Now people are aware of it and just trying to game that thing. And that's just how people are. You tell me to hit my sales numbers, I'm going to hit my sales numbers no matter what. And so you want to have a higher level goal. Your goal is to ship more frequently. Your goal is to go down less and have more uptime, or have customer satisfaction go up, something like that. How do you know if you're meeting your goal? Well, that multiple measures can come in to feed that. So I think that's a really, really good point that people often forget as they think about goal measures. They just start going nuts with measures and say, great, now I can measure engineering. No, you cannot measure engineering. You can measure aspects of it if used in the right way, or you can just burn it all down, I suppose. So just, keep in mind how you use it is almost more important. So that kind of leads me into the third level. So level 1, you find a specific pain that you have and you want to track that. Level 2 is you're starting to look at the fuller picture and track other metrics and communicating those and setting them as baseline, using them as goals. The level 3, I think, is where it gets really fun, and this is probably my favorite phase. And this is where you go just beyond the metrics as numbers and into uncovering actual areas to improve and getting everybody involved. Tell me more about your experience observing people that kind of hit this level.
I agree with you. This one is incredibly fun. These are those like light bulb moments that everybody in CS and education and implementation things get super excited about. Is we talk about things at a management level all the time and at a leadership level, and we need to measure this and we need to improve that and we need to set this goal and do this thing and deliver this thing. But the people that are really making that happen are our individual contributors. They're all of our devs that are out there, and without them, we're not doing anything. So empowering them to really impact positive change can be so incredible. I have quite a few of my engineering leaders that I work with that they really understand. They understand that like happy devs real important, and being able to expose them to what's happening and allow them to see their performance and see how things are going with their teams. Not necessarily them specifically, them personally, but the whole team. How are they impacting change? Um, Opening the metrics up to them allows them to see things in real time, to see what's happening, to see how the work they're doing is impacting the numbers and the metrics and how close they are to goals and whatnot. Also allows them to make changes before us as managers have to actually tell them to. For instance, I'm going to reference our last live show from last week again. If you joined us on that show, or maybe you watched the recording, you may have seen a couple of live comments from some of our devs that were owning some of those long lead times. And the thing is, though, we saw that there, but the conversation didn't start, nor did it end there. I see our team referencing DORA metrics from our tracker all the time. I see them talking about changes that they see all the time and immediately taking actions to improve it. This means that they didn't wait for Kate, our head of engineering, to come to them. They made changes before she even had the chance to see it, which is pretty powerful. Obviously, that's something that takes some time and takes some work to get to, and some trust, and to it's almost a cultural thing at that point. But we all want to be really good at our jobs. We don't really like surprises when it comes to how we're doing as an IC or as a team. The last thing anybody wants to do is get into a review and be like, oh, wait, that happened? Our numbers are where? That's no fun. And so keeping that like transparency, which is something that's huge, like deep rooted goal or value for us, um, really helps you be more effective as a team. You know, using metrics reporting dashboards for weekly or even daily stand ups and talking about it and understanding what's happening and understanding the changes and not doing it as, a weapon or a performance review tool. It's not that at all. It's about, hey, look at what we accomplished and let's talk about what was different from last week to this week. Or, we added this project in and something changed. Like, what is it? And let's work together to understand it and make it better. It's all about learning and things change all the time. I mean, this is tech for goodness sakes. Like, everything is changing and there's always new ways to do things and new things to try. So by seeing this and having that real time, it really helps us to feel good about what we're doing, but also understand it and understand how it impacts the bigger picture.
And I think that the key thing that you talked about in the beginning, which kind of enables what you're talking about at the end, is that it's an entire team effort. Now, just to be clear, there are companies that are staying on level 2 and they're good. That's all they wanted. They just wanted to see some numbers that they can report to their exec to show, and it's usually kind of a middle management type play where they just want to get some visibility into what's happening underneath them. They want to be able to wrap this up in some kind of very easy to understand way to see trend graphs on when it's improving or not and report that. Then they're done. That's all they wanted. They just wanted kind of an understanding, a pulse of things. But in my experience, where it gets exciting is when you say, no, I actually want to improve things and take active measures to improvement. And the best way to do that, just to repeat what you're saying, the best way to do that is to get everybody involved. This isn't just a manager thing. This isn't even just a team lead thing or, a tech lead thing. This is a dev thing. This is people all the way through. I think we learned that lesson with deployment, where the more you get developers involved in deployment, the more ownership they feel, the higher quality of code, and the better customer experience. And I think this is a similar thing. Once you get the devs involved, the people on the front lines, I believe in Australia, the term is at the coal face, the people that are doing the work, that are, as somebody might say, working for a living. I was in the U.S. Navy, and that's how the enlisted always describe themselves. Oh, the officers, I don't know what they do, but we actually work for a living. And those type of people, get those people involved, and they're the ones that are going to know what to change. They're just not going to be guessing and creating long-term charts. They're like, oh yeah, no, this one thing, I know exactly what it is and improve it. And the more visibility you get to empower them, that's where the needle really starts moving.
Absolutely. Well said. Um, so the next part of that, like when you really get everybody involved and everybody's participating and working with what they're seeing, is predictability. And I don't know about any of you, but I get pretty excited about that word. I think Don does too. I've heard it a lot lately. It's something a lot of people are looking for. They want to see that. They want to figure out, like, well, okay, great. I can see it and I can start addressing things that I see, but how do I get in front of it? Like, how do I stop it before it even starts? And as you start setting all these baselines, setting goals, and working with your teams and starting to really understand what's happening, you can start to see patterns. You can start to understand, like, hey, wait a minute, when this happens, we always see this the next week. Why is that? Um, Little things. One really recent example, um, and if you're watching right now, I'm gonna pick on you for a second, but I won't name names. Um, is uh, an engineering lead that I've been working with uh, took vacation, took a week off, which we all need to do, every one of us. But the manager, sometimes that can be a little scary, when the cat's away. And came back and we were reviewing things and digging in and starting a working session. And we took a look at comparison from the week before to the week he was gone. And just like, whoa, wait a minute. there's a big dip, a big dip. Like, that's not okay. But there wasn't a whole lot of things that happened. But why did it make such a big difference for him to be out for a week? And so he's been able to go in and actually look at processes. And within the first 5 minutes or so that we were just on the call and digging in just one or two levels, we were able to see that, oh, wait, that's out of process. Ooh, maybe that's not how that should have gone. I bet if we could have done that. So, what he's doing now is going in and refining some processes and documenting some things, and doing some extra trainings to help put some things into place to make sure that next time he needs to be out or any of his other leaders need to be out, they don't have to worry about it. Like, we all need to be able to take a vacation and actually shut off, not have in the back of our head the whole time, gosh, I hope my team's doing okay. I hope everything's going okay. I hope, you know, what if something breaks and every time your phone goes off, you jump? That's not what you're supposed to be doing on vacation. So, by starting to recognize patterns, starting to understand how to predict what happens with your teams, whether it's a somebody's out sick or on vacation, or it's every time you bring in a medium or large size project, um, there's a change, or I don't know. There's a lot of different ways that that can come up, but if you aren't tracking it, you're going to have an awfully hard time figuring out how to prevent it. But I think that's where things get really, really interesting and a lot of fun to start going, hey, I want to start implementing this new program or make a change in this process. And here's all of this background information that I have to support why we need to do that. So, Don, I'm sure that you've seen quite a few instances like that. Maybe there's one or two that you can think of that you want to share.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think kind of in the past. It's interesting because as you say, things change, things happen where you adopt one thing to the other, but being able to actually visually see the impact of that change, I think is where it gets interesting. I think, for example, I remember there was this time at Atlassian where we, no, hopefully don't offend anyone out there, but Atlassian is a Java shop, or at least was historically, and the large applications were, and there was a group of people that for new work wanted to use Scala and started using Scala and started going down that route, kind of the functional route. And they were really enjoying it, but then there were some other effects. A lot of the code that, for example, normally everyone would have jumped in and fixed. Now some of the people, the Java devs looked at Scala and said, I don't know what that is, and then they stopped doing it. And I think it had an effect on the team. That's not to say Scala is a good technology or bad. I would argue this could happen in any kind of technology shift where you try to adopt a new thing, but maybe you don't bring everyone else up to the speed at the same time or quick enough. And what you can see is that change happens and it starts to drag things down. Maybe that drags your change lead time down. Maybe it drags your deployment frequency because you're deploying fewer things because now it's just a couple people. You have actual measures of this. And I think at the time we didn't have DORA metrics. So it became honestly a little bit more emotional than it probably needed to be. It became, oh, this new thing is wrong and it sucks and it's slow. And then, no, you're wrong and you're doing, it just became like, and we're arguing out of emotion. We weren't saying, look, the deployment frequency dropped from this to this, or look, we're spending much more time in reviews than we did before. Because the FP people would be saying, hey, this code is so bulletproof. Like, yes, it's a little bit more involved to create, but once you create it, you're never going to have a failure. And then the other team would say, or other side, and sadly, it does become a team at some point, right? Is no, that's not true, that it's not that great and it's slowing us down, but we had no numbers. Whereas if we had DORA, we could have pointed at the deployment frequency, we could have pointed at the change lead time to look at that aspect, but also we could have looked at the change failure rate. The Scala code, does that have a much lower change failure rate once you get it through the gauntlet of the type system and everything? But once you get it out there, that stuff is bulletproof. You would see that in the metrics, and we didn't have that. And so I think that was kind of an interesting case where the culture actually would have benefited from actually having numbers and not just been arguing out of emotion and feeling and impressions.
Yes, absolutely. And that emotion stuff takes up a lot of brain space that should be used for creative, bigger things instead of that yucky place that we get into when it's just that gut, like tearing at us somewhere. It's no fun. Like,
Yeah, and I'll
we're
throw
smart
something
people.
else.
We should be doing bigger stuff.
And I'll throw something else on that, and that is nowadays more and more teams are remote. Like our company is fully remote. Many teams are going that way. And so before I could look over at somebody's desk and see that they're frustrated, I could go talk to them, we could go have a drink or a coffee, and that could just kind of resolve. But when you're remote, that gets a lot more difficult to discover these kind of issues. And so when you talk about like where your energy is spending and you're spending it in these kind of online flame wars as you're debating Kanban versus Scrum or, Java versus Golang or, whatever these things are, it's just sucking your energy. And because you're remote, you're not able to repair those relationships. So that just sucks even more energy. And that sucks. But being able to see and prevent that, I think, is a huge step in trying to find a problem before it becomes too big.
Definitely. Definitely. Being able to open up that visibility to the whole company, to your execs, to your founders, to your product team, to whoever, to marketing even. For me in CS, it's so valuable to understand what's really happening. It just it, understanding your what your engineering team is actually doing, how things are working, where they might be struggling. It adds this human element to it from metrics, which doesn't sound right, but it really does, and helps you get a picture of what to expect and what might be going on around you and where you might be able to help, which I think is pretty cool. For me, even understanding what projects they're working on and being able to correlate that with customers that might be really interested in something. It's like, oh, hey, hey, product team, I know that they're working on this right now. What do you think? Do you want to talk to this person? Or I know some information about what somebody's looking for.
Yeah.
That's totally way off of where I was going, but it's a pretty cool thing.
Well,
I know that we're
communication.
down to just. Sorry, Don. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think the main thing that I pulled away from that is just how important communication is. I think when we're talking about
Totally.
tools and metrics, where it's easy to jump into, oh, you just need to buy this thing or adopt this new technology and everything's solved. But the really hard parts in business are the communication, especially as you get remote, especially as you scale up. And that kind of leads me to my last point that I wanted to make, or that last level, and that is monitoring as things go on. So we talked about, like, if you're starting with metrics, you might have some specific thing you're trying to fix. Then you start looking at all the metrics to get a more clear picture, reporting this up, communicating around the company. The third level is where you're in getting everyone involved, including the developers, to actually make changes, and that's exciting. But at some point, you kind of get everything the way you like it. You kind of get things humming, and you're pretty happy with it. And you might think, now I don't need metrics anymore. But you alluded to this earlier in when you were talking about it, and I just wanted to bring it up here as a specific level, and that is things change. And so even if you're awesome today, the economy is going to crash and sales are going to dry up, or you're going to go experience hyper growth and add 3 more teams, or you're going to decide to change languages, your product's going to pivot. All these things can be happening. And where I found metrics to be that fourth level of value is to be that baseline that as things change, I can say, okay, things are getting crazy, everything's going nuts. How is that affecting my delivery performance? How is that affecting how much I'm shipping? How is that affecting the failure of what I'm shipping? It just kind of gives me that little safety blanket, if you will, a canary in the coal mine type thing, where as everything's going nuts, I can see how that's affecting it in actual numbers and not just in guesses and emotion. What have you seen
Absolutely.
as you've talked to customers that have kind of reached this fourth level?
Oh gosh, a lot really. Now, not everybody is here, especially not yet, because DORA is still pretty new for a lot of people. So I think we're going to see a lot more of this. But so far, what I've seen is some of the small stuff of just understanding the differences that and the changes that they see when they bring on a new dev. Maybe it's just one, maybe it's a few, or maybe there's a change in leadership somewhere. Maybe they bring on a new team lead, or they've got a personnel change that happens. Those are pretty easy to pick out and say, oh, hey, this person just started or this person just left, and everything's a little bit weird. Why is that? But what I really see is um, one that maybe isn't so fun to talk about, but downsizing or reorg. Uh, you know, with our current climate, that's something that's a reality right now. And while it's not fun to talk about, it's real and it does happen. And at that point, having tracking in place like this gets almost even more valuable because there's less managers, there's less people that are on the floor, there's less people that are actually looking at things to help make sure that things are running smoothly. So this allows for, you know, a maybe temporarily slimmed down management team to see things quicker, to feel like they still have a hold on what's going on, to maybe even make a case for why they need to rehire or why these positions really were important. And they can actually show it with the data. 'Cause they can show changes, they can show a decline in frequency, they can show more errors coming up. You know, they can show that it's taking much longer to solve issues. I've actually spoke with someone recently that by showing these things, it's allowed them to keep some budget that they weren't going to get to keep to begin with. Um, it's also allowed them to bring on new leads faster. They've been able to say, hey, here's where we were, here's what we expected. Those new people come in and go, I feel like I understand so much more about the landscape of this engineering team than I would have otherwise. It gives them that insight that they wouldn't normally have. Instead of just saying, well, here's what we try to do, or here's what our goals are, or whatever. It's like, no, actually, here's what we've been doing. And over time, here's how we've grown and here's how we've improved. And then we may have had a setback. Um, but keeping budget, onboarding new people, um, being able to show how maybe team organization has affected things, maybe it's affected bandwidth, and you can actually show that by shrinking those teams down or moving people around, things have gotten stretched out. It's taken more time to get things done. So when you have execs coming back going, why isn't this out? Why are we missing this deadline? You say, well, in the past, it took us this long. Right now, because of the changes, it's taking us this long. Simple as that. And the cool part is they don't even have to come to you to ask. They can just look because it's there and they have access to it. I mean, I could probably talk for the next hour about that sort of thing because there's a lot of it, but I know we only have about 4 minutes left. So let me know if you want to talk more about those things, reach out to me.
I think that's a great story about how, tracking things can help in the good times when things are going well and you want to make sure the growth. I remember, for example, I was on a team, hip chat team, and I've talked about this in a previous video, but basically we took a team of like 13 or 15 and company decided, we're going to go big on this, and blew it up to 100 within, I think, like 6 months or something. Took giant teams of 30 from different places that learned different technologies. They had no idea what even Python practically was, and put them on the project. And as you would imagine, that doesn't generally work well. You'd think that Fred Brooks would have taught us that, but not everyone has learned that lesson. It's just like, throw people at it. But on the converse side, having downturn is definitely a thing. So, you know, sometimes, and I love that story. I love the end of that story, which is the person you're talking about actually got budget because they were able to show the effect of how things were going. And I think that's the whole value of metrics. Yes, you can make statistics lie and all that sort of thing, but they can also be a tool for good to help illuminate a situation, good or bad, to help you get to that next level.
Right. And the fact that you didn't have to spend, 80 hours building out spreadsheets and all sorts of stuff, trying to guess and pull information. And I mean, we've all been there, we've all done that, but it's already there. Once you've gotten to this level, something comes up. Hey, you can go, you know what? I'm going to have a few reports on your desk tomorrow, and we're going to talk about them. And you can go in and pull everything you need because it's already in there. Or heck, in an hour,
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. So yeah, no matter where you are in the journey, the viewer out there that's watching this, these are the 4 levels that we came up with as Leigh Ann and I were talking about, the sales calls and our personal experience and past experience, and talking to customers in the customer success realm. These are 4 kind of levels that we found. I'm sure there's more. I'd love to hear from you. I'm sure we both would love to hear kind of what your thoughts are Is there a way that you found that's really important to use metrics that go above and beyond what we've talked about? Because I think there's a lot of opportunity in this. And as I said, it's such a freeing experience to go from just guessing and arguing via emotion and whoever's the loudest wins and all those kind of things to actually putting some numbers behind it, but doing so in such a way that you're not just beating people over the head with numbers, obviously, but you're incorporating that into part of your understanding to start to quantify some of the things that you might have guessed. Well, I want to say thank you to Leigh Ann for coming on the final episode of season 1. I remember when I saw Johnny Carson, for anyone who will like Johnny Carson, I remember watching in the last episode of Johnny Carson ever, I believe it was Bette Midler who was on. So I remember she sang a song, but I don't think I'm going to make you sing a song, although that would be super fun as that last awkward thing to make you do. But
I mean, it's not unheard of. I may have sang a Bette Midler song when I was in school many, many years ago.
That's right. You're a theater kid, so musicals are not a crazy thought.
No, that's Christmas party material or something, though. This is not live YouTube. Off the cuff, please.
Fine.
Maybe someday.
Again, thank you very much for coming. And to everyone else, I want to say thanks for joining me on season 1 of Sleuth TV Live. I want to hear from you, though. Actually, we're going to do a retrospective about this tomorrow. Like, what did we think worked well? What do we think didn't? Did we cover the topics people care about? But ultimately, it's all about you and what you find interesting. Please let us know in the comments of this. Please feel to like this video or otherwise if you found it interesting. But I want to know, what types of things should we cover again? Should we do more news segments? Should we do more tutorials? Should we do more like this? You enjoy the interview section? Anything and everything. I want to hear from you. What should season 2 be composed of? What would be the most useful in your journey to improve development efficiency? So until then, see you next time.